Alright, welcome to the Strange North channel. In this video, I'm going to tell you all about a man named Paul Hellyer. This guy has been really prominent in promoting UFO interest within Canada. Paul Hellyer was a very prominent politician, writer, businessman, and engineer in Canada, and at one time he served as defense minister, and he made some very bold claims about UFOs and extraterrestrial life. And before I go into the bold claims that Mr. Hellyer made after he retired from political life, I'm going to explain his general history within Canada, because even though this guy is fairly prominent within UFO circles, a lot of people aren't aware of the fact that he was a fairly major Canadian politician for many years. And so I'm just going to jump right into his history. So Paul Hellyer was born on August 6th of 1923 on a farm near Waterford, Ontario, and he was the son of Lula and Audrey Hellyer. Paul took an interest in aviation at a young age, and after he graduated from high school, he enrolled in aeronautical engineering at the Curtis Wright Technical Institute of Aeronautics in Glendale, California. He graduated from this program in 1941, shortly before his 18th birthday, and while he was studying, he even managed to obtain his private pilot's license. Mr. Hellyer graduated from this program in the middle of the Second World War, and his technical skills were in high demand, and so he quickly found himself in Fort Erie, Ontario, working for Fleet Aircraft, where he led a group of engineers who manufactured training aircraft for military pilots. He actually tried becoming a Royal Canadian Air Force pilot so he could serve in the war effort, but he was told that no more pilots were necessary, and so he later joined the Canadian Army as an artillery gunner, although he never actually served overseas. But while the war was still going on, for a short time he did serve as a guard at a prisoner of war camp in Alberta. After the war ended, he settled in Toronto, and he married his wife Ellen in June of 1945. Shortly after getting married, Paul purchased a woman's clothing store in Toronto, and him and his family lived in a 3-bedroom apartment above the store as they operated it. And during this time, he also completed a Bachelor of Arts at the University of Toronto. Paul graduated from the U of T in 1949, and that same year he was elected to Parliament as an MP for the Davenport riding. He ran as a Liberal, and at the time he was the youngest person ever elected to the House of Commons of Canada. Mr. Hellyer initially entered politics to pursue his interests in economics and housing, but his experience with the military led to positions in the Defense Department in the government of Louis Saint Laurent. He was first a parliamentary assistant to the defense minister, but then he later became appointed Associate Minister of National Defense in April of 1957. This post was short-lived though, because Hellyer lost his seat when Saint Laurent lost the 1957 election 2 months later. As his political career was developing, he was also becoming fairly prominent in business. By the late 1950s, Paul was the president of both a home building company as well as a land development company. And he also loved singing quite a bit. He studied quite seriously at the Banff Centre for the Arts in Alberta and the Toronto Conservatory of Music. Mr. Hellyer returned to Parliament in a 1958 by-election in the downtown Toronto riding of Trinity, and he rose to prominence as an opposition critic to John Diefenbaker's Progressive Conservative government. When the Liberals won the election in 1963, Prime Minister Lester B. Pearson appointed Paul Minister of National Defense. During his tenure as minister, Paul oversaw Canada's adoption of nuclear weapons, and he also organized the unification of the armed forces, where he merged the separate service branches of the Air Force and the Navy into the Canadian Armed Forces. Paul was then appointed Transport Minister in 1967, and in April of 1968, he contested leadership of the Liberal Party, but he withdrew on the third ballot and finished 4th overall behind the eventual winner, Pierre Trudeau. Mr. Hellyer continued in his role as Transport Minister under Pierre Trudeau, and he was also appointed Canada's first senior minister in 1968. That position is now called Deputy Prime Minister. That same year, in 1968, Paul was made responsible for a federal task force on housing and urban development, which presented its report in 1969. This report called for the federal government to have a bigger role, but Prime Minister Trudeau believed that this was more of a provincial jurisdiction, and this caused a serious rift between Trudeau and Paul Hellyer, and Mr. Hellyer resigned from cabinet on April 29th of 1969. Paul would sit in Parliament as an independent beginning in 1971, and after Mr. Hellyer's attempt to create a new political party, Action Canada, failed, Progressive conservative leader Robert Stanfield invited him to join the PC caucus. Mr. Hellyer returned to prominence as an opposition critic, and he was re-elected in 1972 as a progressive conservative. He would then go on to lose the seat in the 1974 election. Mr. Hellyer contested the leadership of the PC party in 1976, but he really undermined his own campaign by insulting red Tories in his speech to the convention. The term red Tories is referring to conservatives that are a bit more centrist in their politics. Mr. Hellyer dropped out after the second ballot, and he eventually finished a distant 6th place behind the winner and future Prime Minister Joe Clark. Paul Hellyer returned to the Liberal Party in 1982, but he did not return to Parliament. In 1997, Paul founded the Canadian Action Party, which he led until 2004. Like his earlier party, Action Canada, the Canadian Action Party was organized on principles of economic nationalism that opposed globalization and free trade. He would run for Parliament again in both 1997 and 2000 as leader of the Canadian Action Party, but he could not secure a seat. In the mid-2000s, he tried to negotiate a merger between his party and the NDP, but this did not really pan out, and the Canadian Action Party was dissolved in 2017. And so Mr. Hellyer had quite an extensive political career in Canada, and while this was happening, he also wrote over 12 books, and he was a frequent panelist on CBC. He was also an early investor in the Toronto Sun, and this made him a millionaire when this paper sold in 1982. He also wrote a regular column for the paper between 1974 and 1984. And as I previously mentioned, Mr. Hellyer was also a very successful businessman at the same time. Now I'm going to get into some of the bold claims that Mr. Hellyer made after he retired from political life. And just to back up for a second, Mr. Hellyer was a senior cabinet minister during two of Canada's best-known UFO sightings, the Falcon Lake, Manitoba incident, as well as the Shag Harbor sighting in Nova Scotia. Both of these occurred in 1967, and of course that same year you had the discovery of the Dumal circles in Alberta. And on top of that, in 1967, Mr. Hellyer himself was the person that officially opened the world's first UFO landing pad in St. Paul for Canada's Centennial Project. So in early September of 2005, Paul Hellyer made international headlines by publicly announcing that he believed in the existence of UFOs. On September 25th of that year, he was invited to be a speaker at an exopolitics conference in Toronto, where he told the story of seeing a UFO one night with his late wife and some friends as they were relaxing. And he was really the first cabinet-level minister of a G7 nation to allege existence of extraterrestrials. Paul Hellyer claimed that Earth had been visited regularly by sentient life forms from other planets for many years, and that governments of high-income, highly industrialized countries like Canada and the US were aware of this and keeping it a secret. At various times, Mr. Hellyer claimed that extraterrestrials possessed advanced technology that could be used on Earth, namely to end our dependence on fossil fuels and help in the fight against climate change. He also stated that extraterrestrials were willing to help the people of Earth if only we weren't so belligerent and aggressive with one another. In 2007, the Ottawa Citizen reported that Paul Hellyer was demanding that world governments disclose alien technology that could be used to help solve the problem of climate change. In an interview with RT, formerly Russia Today, in 2014, Mr. Hellyer said that at least 4 species of aliens have been visiting Earth for thousands of years, with most of them coming from other star systems, although he claimed that there were some living on Venus, Mars, and Saturn's moon. In a 2000 interview Paul Hellyer gave with Vice Media, he claimed that a U.S. Air Force general told him that there have been numerous occasions when U.S. government officials have been face-to-face with alien life forms. Canada's Maclean's magazine called him a crazy person in a 2015 article before Paul made his way across Canada on the Disclosure Canada tour to discuss, quote, Earth's cosmic Watergate. Paul Hellyer later claimed that up to 80 different alien species have visited Earth, and he even said, quote, the Star of Bethlehem is one of God's flying saucers, end quote. And he also claimed that UFOs are quite common and they're as prevalent as airplanes in the skies. You might remember this, but in 2010, Stephen Hawking warned that the threat of extraterrestrial invasion is serious, and Paul Hellyer accused Mr. Hawking of spreading damaging misinformation about extraterrestrials, claiming that they have actually contributed greatly to human technological advancements. Mr. Hellyer said that nearly all extraterrestrial races are benign and benevolent, and there are only about 1 or 2 bad groups. He also claimed that the cosmos is similar to Star Trek, with a federation of aliens that has a rule not to interfere in the affairs of humans on planet Earth. Mr. Hellyer would pass away on August 8th of 2021, and he maintained his beliefs until his death. And of course, these are very bold claims, but there have been many recent developments which have reignited interest in this subject and have really given this topic a lot of credibility. I mean, in 2021, Canadian Defense Minister Harjit Sajjan was briefed by US military officials on UFO activity in the United States. And in fall of 2022, Canada's top scientists launched the Sky Canada project. And this organization is planning on giving a public report in fall of 2024 on this subject. And of course, Mr. Hellyer received a lot of ridicule and flack as he was making these bold claims, as can be expected. But over the past 5 or 6 years in North America, there have been some major events, including US congressional hearings on this subject, as well as the Pentagon releasing official videos of UAPs in action. And when you consider those developments, as well as some significant developments in Canada, this whole topic has really gained a lot more credibility in recent years. And so it really makes you wonder if there was anything to what Mr. Hellyer was saying. Obviously, a lot of these claims can't be easily proven or disproven, and so it's up to individuals to make their own minds up and form their own opinions. But I just wanted to do a video on the life and bold claims of Paul Hellyer, because this guy is really a major figure in UFO UAP circles, and his claims have really ignited a lot of interest, especially in light of recent developments in North America. I hope you found that interesting and informative, and within a week I'm going to be posting a video on the Falcon Lake, Manitoba sighting, because this is one of Canada's most well-known UFO sightings and one of the best documented sightings in the world. If you watched this far, thank you very much, and if you're interested in watching more of my content in general, please consider subscribing to my channel. This really helps me out, and I try to upload at least 1 new video per week. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Strange North channel.